What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to Wildcat Cave. It has been a long football season this year for Kentucky. Coming into the season, there was dark horse playoff hopes, dreams of finishing 10-2, and talking about playing Georgia for a chance in Atlanta. None of that happened. So where does that leave the Cats? What does the offseason look like going forward? We'll talk about all of that as well as transfer portal needs, bowl projections, and more in this video. It may be a long one, but stick around to the end. We're going to cover a lot, and let me know your thoughts on the season. Really quick, I owe my buddy Brett a shout out. He guessed the UK Gonzaga score the closest a couple videos ago, and I forgot to say that in the last video. But let's start by looking at this football season as a whole. The Cats finished the season at 7-5, with their wins being Miami of Ohio, Florida, Youngstown State, Northern Illinois, Mississippi State, Mizzou, and Louisville. Their 5 losses came from Ole Miss, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and Vanderbilt. Yeah, that Vanderbilt. On the season as a whole, there's a lot of things that hurt Kentucky. It started with the Chris Rodriguez being suspended, issues with the O-line, a Will Levis injury that we may not have realized the severity of, questionable play calling, special teams disasters, and then maybe even some locker room turmoil. If you couldn't tell from that list, a lot of Kentucky's woes this year came on the offensive side of the ball, which is really disappointing considering the talent that they had. Easily the best freshman wide receiver combo UK has ever seen, one of the best quarterbacks in school history, and in my opinion, the best running back in school history. It was frustrating to watch our offense sputter at times with all of that talent. But if there was a bright spot for UK this season, it had to be the defense. Brad White had his squad dialed in for almost the entire season. They played only really about 10 poor quarters of football all year. The second half against South Carolina, and then the Vandy and Tennessee games. However, they still did enough against South Carolina and Vanderbilt to win those games if the offense had been more productive. A stat came out last week that said if Kentucky was able to score 25 or more per game, they would have finished 11-1. Last year, the Cats averaged 32. This year, they only averaged 22. That line between 10-2 and 7-5 this year was super thin, and it seemed like nothing went right for Kentucky. So, first things first. How does Kentucky fix its offensive issues this offseason? Well, here's the good news. They have a ton of young talent, and it's all but confirmed that Dane Key, Barryon Brown, and Josh Caddis are all returning, as well as some of the running backs who have some experience. Also, I think the entire offensive line will be back next year, and while they didn't play great a lot of this season, they got better at the end, and they'll have a full year of playing together under their belt. Going into the portal, I do think there are some major needs for Kentucky to pick up. First and foremost would be a quarterback. It's going to be close to impossible to find a quarterback like Levis again, but there are some names out there that Kentucky's looking at that could come in and be really productive for Kentucky throwing to these young receivers that we have. There are a lot of factors that will go into which quarterback UK pursues, so we might save that video for a later date. Kentucky will also need to go get some offensive linemen, specifically tackles. Like I said, basically all of our guys will return, but they're almost all interior offensive linemen who were forced to play tackle this year out of necessity. If we can pick up some quality tackles in the transfer portal, I think our line will take a huge leap going into next year. I think they may also take a look at a running back or two. We have depth at that position, but no one that's really proven themselves as a standout number one. And finally, with J.J. Weaver and Jordan Wright potentially leaving, even though it isn't certain that they will, we may need to look at picking up an edge rusher or two. So I posted a poll asking how people felt about the season, and almost every single person voted that they were disappointed, but the season was not awful. Which really is a testament to what Stoops has done here at Kentucky, that they can finish a year with 7 wins and the fan base be disappointed. We used to pray that Kentucky made 6 wins and was bowl eligible. But I think that if Kentucky can win their bowl game, that may at least help ease some of the disappointment that people around the program feel right now. 8-5 with a bowl win sounds a lot better than 7-6. But speaking of bowls, That situation is up in the air right now too. LSU losing to Texas A&M really hurt Kentucky's bowl status. Now, assuming LSU loses to Georgia in the SEC championship, that would leave Georgia in the playoffs with LSU, Alabama, and Tennessee all in New Year's Six bowls. Then, the next best SEC team would be Ole Miss, who will likely go to the Citrus Bowl. After that, it's probably South Carolina, although it's not certain. But South Carolina did sneak up in the SEC standings, and they are probably heading to the Outback Bowl or whatever they call that now. After that, that's where Kentucky falls, into that next level of bowl game that's all really about the same. The Texas Bowl, Vegas Bowl, Music City, and the Liberty Bowl. Now, out of those, I think Kentucky's first choice would probably be the Music City Bowl. However, there are two caveats to that. Number one is that it is the exact same time as the UK U of L basketball game. Now, apparently, that is not going to be a deciding factor whatsoever for Kentucky. If you aren't familiar with how the bowls work, the SEC allows the teams to have a say in what bowl they go to. And Kentucky will more than likely express that they would like the Music City Bowl regardless of the U of L game. But the one caveat that could hurt that is that it is an SEC Big Ten matchup. Now, the Big Ten does not give their teams the option to pick which bowl they go to. So if the Big Ten sends Iowa to the Music City Bowl, then the Music City Bowl will not want a rematch of the bowl game last year where Kentucky beat Iowa, in which case Kentucky will likely end up in the Liberty Bowl. I'd be surprised if they go to Texas or Vegas, but it's possible. I've even seen a few projections where they do jump up into the Gator Bowl against a team like Notre Dame, which would be great for UK. Everybody would love that. The program would like it. The fans would be into it. And if you're wanting Will Levis to play in the bowl game, it's much more likely he plays against a team like that than maybe in Oklahoma State in the Liberty Bowl. I think that situation is probably only likely if LSU beats Georgia and jumps up into the playoffs. But with these bowl games, you never really know. It's always a crapshoot. So we're just going to have to wait and see. And now for the million-dollar question around Big Blue Nation is who stays and who gets fired. It's been the offseason for a total of like 3 days now, and the coaching carousel has already started spinning. Luke Fickell is leaving Cincinnati, and the first two names that popped up on everybody's radar were Brad White and Vince Marrow. Kentucky doesn't want to lose either of those guys, but when other teams want your coaches, that's a good problem to have, and we'll just have to see how things shake out. It really comes down to, do those guys want to be a head coach? And if so, do they want to be there at a place like Cincinnati, who here soon is going to become a Power 5 team? And they've shown that they can have success at Cincinnati. They just made the playoffs a year or two ago. It also came out Monday that Stoops has already gotten rid of the running back coach, John Settle. He's widely regarded as one of the best running back coaches in the industry, but it seems that the consensus around the program was that this decision was based mostly on recruiting, and Stoops just believed that Settle wasn't getting it done in the recruiting end of the job. But the biggest coaching change that everyone in the state of Kentucky is waiting to hear is the offensive coordinator, Rich Scangarello. Now let me say, I have been just as critical as anyone of Rich this season. I think at times he looked like he was over his skis. He was trying to run a pro offense with guys who just aren't pros. His philosophy seemed way too predictable and way too conservative a lot of the time. But mostly towards the end of the year, there were flashes of what could have been a really good offense at times. But it was never sustained and it was never consistent, even against bad teams. And I don't know that there is a clear-cut choice on if Stoops fires him. A lot of the issues we saw this season aren't black and white problems. I think Stoops really kept the reins on Scangarello at times, telling him to run the ball when we probably should be throwing it, and the offensive line hampered Levis's time in the pocket and didn't allow great running lanes to get things going, especially early in the year. It could be the case, however, that even if Stoops believes that Rich is a good offensive coordinator, which he may be, we don't know, the fan pressure may be just too much to overcome. When I was at the Louisville game, I was asking fans near me if there's anything Scangarello could do to save his job, and everybody with a unanimous answer said no. I even asked, what if we go out and score 50 on Louisville today? Would that be enough to consider keeping his job? And the answer was still unequivocally not at all. Stoops may have to let him go just to keep the fans on his side. In my opinion, I think it's probably more likely than not that Rich does get fired, and I think overall that's probably the right choice. Trying to run a pro offense in college is almost never effective. In college, successful teams run tempo offenses with a run and gun style and take big shots and allow their athletes to get into space. I think we saw that this year with Tennessee. Now, I think Tennessee took that philosophy to the extreme, and I don't think Kentucky has to go that far with it. But with the talent that they had, we could have ran a modern college offense effectively, but instead, we ran one of the slowest offenses in the NCAA. Personally, I would like to see Rich Scangarello move on and we move on from him, but I don't know that that's necessarily 100% guarantee that the next guy will be better, and I don't think that Rich is completely terrible at what he does. I think there could have been some learning curves, and if Stoops allows him to open up his entire playbook next year, I think there's a chance there for a potentially really good offense. But like I said, with the fan pressure and the way the season turned out, I think it's probably better if they just go ahead and split and move on from each other. And by the time this video comes out, Stoops may have already made his choice and it be announced to the public. If not, I think it'll come very soon. If you remember Liam Cohen, when Eddie Gran was fired the first week of December, they had the interviews done and had Liam Cohen hired by December 14th. And then Rich himself was hired within a week of Cohen accepting the Rams job. And with the transfer portal and other factors, I just don't think that this is a choice that they can afford to wait 2 or 3 weeks on. So it'll happen soon if it hasn't already. But that is going to wrap up this video, guys. Let me know your thoughts on the season as a whole. What do you think Stoops should do about Scangarello? Should we keep him or should we fire him? Be sure to subscribe to the channel right now and like the video. We're officially moving into basketball season for the most part, and man, college basketball is crazy right now, so we're going to have a lot to talk about in the next couple months. I'll see you guys in the next video. Go Cats!